The story is told in the most unlinear fashion I have ever witnessed before. And if you thought a Faulkner novel messed with time, Marquez is just over here like, hold my rum, Faulkner, and watch this. Hey everybody, welcome back to It's Too Late to Apologize Book Reviews. I'm Stella, and today we're going to be talking about 100 Years of Solitude, written by the Colombian author Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I have this old Penguin mass market paperback translated by Gregory Rabassa. Rabassa worked primarily in Spanish and Portuguese translation. He produced English language versions for the works of several major Latin American novelists, including Julio Cortázar, Jorge Amado, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. On the advice of Cortázar, Marquez waited 3 years for Rabassa to schedule translating 100 Years of Solitude, and later professed Rabassa's translation to be superior to the Spanish original. I don't know that I believe that, but it's good to know that the translation was endorsed by the author. Rabassa has received awards for his translation work and was honored with the Gregory Kolovakos Award for the expansion of Hispanic literature to English language audiences. In the past, I've often overlooked the integral importance of the translator's contribution in bringing a work over to other cultures and audiences. There can be so much lost in translation, and I want to make an effort in addressing different translations of works and which is considered the best for the type of reader one may be. And I think this can make a huge impact on how literature, be it classic works or modern ones, are digested by different kinds of readers. A reader's background can really change which translation would be most appropriate. For example, if you want to read the Odyssey, there's over 60 English translations. Want to read the Iliad? There's over 200 English translations. Do you want to read it in prose or in verse, as in close to Greek as possible, or as colloquial as possible? Researching translations is a deep rabbit hole of an undertaking at times, people. But it has a huge impact on how you enjoy or are able to process literature. Some older scholarly translations of some works are almost esoteric, and that can lead readers to judge the literature unjustly, or even worse, miss out on some of the finest works created in human history. And that would be a terrible shame. But I digress. You can confidently go into reading 100 Years of Solitude knowing there is only one English translation, and it's golden, pony boy. 100 Years of Solitude is considered Gabriel Garcia Marquez's masterpiece. The novel was published in 1967 and published in English in 1970. It tells the story of 7 generations of the Buendia family. And how ironic that that family's last name means good morning. It was not a good morning. Jose Arcadio Buendia and his wife Ursula leave Rio Hacha, Colombia, after Jose Arcadio kills a man for insulting him. While he and Ursula camp by a river, Jose Arcadio has a dream of Macondo, a city of mirrors that reflected the world in and around it. They found the new city there, at the riverside. Macondo soon grows into a town, and gypsies visit it every year and are the only source of connection to the outer world. The gypsies bring the townspeople technology like magnets, telescopes, and ice. Their leader, Marquez, becomes a longtime friend to Jose Arcadio, and he becomes obsessed with solving the mysteries of the world and of the technology that the gypsies bring to Macondo. Several strange and unusual events happen to the town, and the Buendia family are unable, but more often unwilling, to avoid misfortune. Through mail and train routes, Macondo becomes connected to the outer world, and a revolution against the government turns one of the Buendias into a revolutionary leader. The railroad brings new technology and foreigners to Macondo, and an American company starts a banana plantation outside the town and brings prosperity and luxury to the townspeople. But it ends in tragedy as the Colombian army massacres thousands of striking plantation workers and hides the evidence. And this incident is based on the actual events of the Banana Massacre of 1928. 100 years later, towards the end of the novel, Macondo atrophies into a derelict shadow of what it once was. The Buendia family, through obsession, vanity, incest, pedophilia, insanity, neglect, and pride, finds its bloodline and Macondo in ruins as it was destined to end from the start. But this story is not only about Macondo or the Buendia family. It's about humanity, and it's about all of us, as Macondo itself is a mirror of the world around it and inside it. The story is told in the most unlinear fashion I have ever witnessed before. And if you thought a Faulkner novel messed with time, Marquez is just over here like, hold my rum, Faulkner, and watch this. The way the story is told makes it feel like a work of mythology. And boy, is there a lot of incest in mythology. I mean, am I right? 100 Years of Solitude is a work of magical realism, which adds to the feeling of the myth, but in a way that makes the magic very mundane. It's as if the magic is no more unusual than the force of gravity. No one in the story finds it unusual at all. More often, the actual mundane things in life, like movies and ice, are considered magical and strange. And I think this serves to make us see how absurd life can be, but that we are all surrounded by magic also, and that most people cannot see it. It can also reinforce superstitious notions as logical and obvious. I found myself wondering if there was some connection between the 7 generations of Buendia and the 7 mortal sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. All the Buendias are mired in one, if not more, of these mortal sins. And I find it interesting that the 7 corresponding virtues of humility, chastity, charity, gratitude, temperance, patience, and diligence is shown in only one Buendia, in Ursula. The chain of events of this family starts with an act of blind pride by José Arcadio when he kills a man with a spear through the throat for insulting him. Years later, Fernanda kills 2 men with voodoo by sticking needles through their throats, in another act of ignorant pride. And all the other mortal sins are presented throughout the story and repeated several times. Incest is a reoccurring thing in the Buendia family, and this family's solitude only makes the incest more probable. Its characters cannot communicate with one another. They are apathetic and self-absorbed. Most of the relationships often feel empty and superficial because they cannot understand their own emotions, and their solitude does not lead to them understanding or examining themselves, but only leads to them assuming that the problem is the outside. But how can one understand the world if one can't even understand themselves? An extremely relevant theme in this novel is that it takes longer to discover than to forget. And this is a sad human truth, and one of the roots of the cyclical nature of history. It takes so long for someone to learn something to be true, or to build something of value. But it takes a fraction of a moment to forget or destroy that thing. But I think another root cause for the cyclical nature of human history is that humans are terribly arrogant. José Arcadio is obsessed with progress and the modernization of Macondo. But the past is also respected, in Marquez's story, by the valued knowledge of the indigenous people's remedies and wisdom. Many people look at the atrocities and suffering of the past and think that we have evolved so much or have progressed too far to allow such foolishness to happen again. But it simply isn't true. Humanity has not changed. It is the same. We are just as flawed, and that we struggle to see our own hubris or the fragility of civilized society is the truest danger. There are several predictions made through the course of this story. Pilar Ternera reads the cards of many Buendias throughout the story, and Colonel Aureliano, who is considered clairvoyant, has his orders followed before he even gives them. There is this idea of hereditary memory that Marquez is exploring. And there is a moment where Pilar reads the cards wrong, and because she reads the cards wrong, her son dies. But this doesn't save the person who was supposed to die. They still die by some unknown force. But the idea that an error is what directed the bullet to kill her son is intriguing. It creates this murky connection between cause and effect, between fate and prophecy. And then Marquez, who is considered to have the keys of Nostradamus, writes a 100-year coded history of the Buendia family. And this history sits unknown to the family for years. We don't know when Marquez wrote it. But is it prophecy? Or is it fate? Could there be some man-made error in the interpretation just as Pilar had? But because of the wrong interpretation, Because of the errors of man, the wrong events take place. But is it wrong? Or is it fate? It's an interesting thought. And I wonder if Marquez's history accounted for Pilar's error in reading her cards. It's curious. The town of Macondo has a few plagues that visit it, and I found it interesting to dissect what Marquez considers a plague. It is not just the negative that constitutes this title for him. There are 3 plagues named in this novel: an insomnia plague, a proliferation plague, and the banana plague. The insomnia plague feels tightly linked to the cyclical nature of history. Jose Arcadio's response to the insomnia plague feels just like mankind's attempts at capturing their own history. The insomnia affects everyone's memory, and to battle this fear of forgetting everything, Jose Arcadio writes the names of everything on everything. But soon he realizes that the purpose of the things will lose their meaning also, and so he writes the purpose of all the things down as well. This is just like humanity's attempts at not forgetting itself or its progress, and it's a prideful endeavor, but it's inevitable. The proliferation plague seems like a great thing in the beginning, but it leads mankind to abundance, and also gluttony, envy, lust, and sloth. It's inevitable. And the banana plague brings prosperity to Macondo, but it also brings greed and wrath. It's inevitable. There are those 7 deadly sins again. And Jose Arcadio wanted to build a perpetual motion machine based on the principle of a pendulum, a cyclical system that is constantly turning kinetic energy into potential energy over and over again. And then is that not the perfect description of humanity? Oh, it's good. It's good. But this perpetual motion machine can only remain in motion while nothing outside of it interrupts it. They are wonderful in theory, but in reality, you can't use them as an energy source. They can only work in solitude, just like many of the characters in this novel. This novel exemplifies the thought that we are forever longing for what we don't have. And when we do get that thing we most wanted, that we'll start to instead yearn for what we lost when our dreams came true. A perpetual nostalgia that always seeks to be somewhere else, of never being in the present, of always looking to the future or longing for the past. The cyclical nature of history, fate, and humanity, of how we are the primary contributor of our own suffering, and how our biases or beliefs shape how we see everything. It is about solitude and its many forms: peaceful, tortured, lonely, but beautiful solitude. No matter how numerous your family or friends, or how few, the only person you cannot escape is yourself. For some, that is the greatest solace, and yet for others, the worst kind of torture. But this is what it means to be human, and that is what 100 Years of Solitude attempts to tell its readers. It's about the absurdities of life, and how we are surrounded by magic every day, and that most people cannot or refuse to ever see it. It's about tragedy, and how that tragedy may take a mourning of 4 years, 11 months, and 2 days for that rain to finally run its course. But it will end. Keep holding on, for one day this too shall pass. And finally, that nothing lasts forever, the good or the bad. It is all temporal and finite, so watch closely for the magic. This is the second of Marquez's novels I've read, and while I definitely like this novel a lot more than Love in the Time of Cholera, I find his style of writing and storytelling to not really be my thing. But that is so subjective, it's practically useless. I think Marquez is a great writer. And this novel is so singular and unique that the more I think about it, the more I appreciate what his goal was. I tend to enjoy experiencing the story vicariously through the characters, or understanding what makes a person tick. And this story wasn't about that, but that's okay. Toward the end of the novel, it was a little difficult to keep all the characters and the timeline straight because all the characters have the same 3 or 4 names. 7 generations, repeating the same 3 or 4 names. Just over and over and over again. Got a little tough at times, not gonna lie. Everything feels like it's happening all at once because of the constant back and forth with the timelines of each character. It was at times really easy to forget that someone was already dead, or that a character hadn't died yet, And so I found myself not really invested in any one character's story. Everybody dies, and I didn't really care. Except for the very last death. That kind of punched me right in the feels. And it was the shortest lived character in the novel. That last death signals the end of the Buendia family. And that death was because of his ancestors' neglect in two different ways. The neglect of care because his father was mourning the death of his mother, but also the neglect for one's life, from keeping the ants in the house at bay. Left alone, one's life and home will fall to entropy. Life is a daily struggle to manage. One cannot ignore the termites in your home's foundation without serious repercussions. One must fight back the invasion of ants in one's home. And after Ursula and Amaranta Ursula died, and Santa Sofia de la Piedad leave, there was no one left to fight the daily neglect. This family needed more Ursulas. There are upsetting things that happen in this novel. There is pedophilia, where a grown man marries a child, and a grown female relative molests a boy, a family member. There is a war, people die, people are massacred, but the point of good literature is not to portray society as what it assumes it is or how it wants to be seen, but rather by what it actually is. So if you find yourself discomforted by reading a portrayal of the true nature of human society, Marquez's writing probably won't be for you. People who experience this discomfort judge Marquez as being creepy, but I don't think he is. I'd rather be told how the world is than be lied to. And Marquez doesn't glorify pedophilia. He ridicules it by showing us this noble, revolutionary man that would choose a child for his wife, a little girl who could not dress herself and still wet the bed. It's ridiculous. There is nothing revolutionary or liberal about his choice for a wife. Now is there? Nope. Oh, the irony. This revolutionary man looks a lot like the men he goes to war against. And so the cycle goes on and on and on. But have you read 100 Years of Solitude? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did it confuse you to no end? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe so that more people can find some great books. And I'll see you in the next video.